All right, y'all, let me set the scene real quick. My upbringing? Hella unorthodox. My parents were die-hard hippies, the free-spirited kind that burn incense and preach about making love, not war. From a young age, they planted this free love mentality deep in my psyche. To them, sex was as natural and casual as breathing air. So it's no surprise that I grew up being pretty promiscuous and open about my sexuality. I ain't ashamed to admit I was a bit of a player back in the day. Slept around, had my fair share of one-night stands and casual flings. Polyamory? Been there, done that, and got the metaphorical t-shirt. Shit, I used to call myself aggressively pansexual without an ounce of hesitation. Like in my perfect utopian world, swapping spit and fluids would be as socially accepted and banal as a firm handshake, you dig? I'd happily get down and dirty with just about anyone even remotely attractive. No questions asked. But hold up, don't get it twisted. I ain't completely oblivious to societal norms, neither. Despite my freewheeling ways, I like to think I got a high level of emotional intelligence and empathy flowing through these veins. I understood, even back then, that most folks ain't built like me with that open-minded, liberal mentality towards sex and relationships. So even if I was wildly attracted to someone, if they made it crystal clear they weren't feeling me like that, it was all gravy, baby. I could keep things 100% platonic without tripping or catching feels. Then in 2015, everything changed when I met my now wife through some mutual friends at a kickback. Polar opposite of my free-loving ways, this one. She viewed sex as this deep, intimate, almost sacred thing, meant for committed relationships and true love only. Basically the antithesis to my lax beliefs and carefree attitudes when it came to intimacy. But fam, I swear there was just this indescribable click and vibe between us from Jump Street. An energy, a chemistry, a cosmic connection. Call it whatever you want. We'd kick it constantly, watching movies together, chatting about anything and everything under the sun. Our personalities and energies just meshed in this effortless, natural way I never experienced before, for real. One fateful night we were chillin' at her place, just the two of us. Some Avengers flick was playing on the screen. Her roommate had to dip out for something, leaving us alone on the couch. And fam, I ain't gonna lie, the sexual tension was thicker than a Snicker that night. Needless to say, one thing led to another, and before we knew it, we got crazy freaky in the sheets. You dig? Like wildly passionate, raunchy, raw sex out of nowhere. Afterward, we had one of those awkward, define the relationship talks that everyone dreads. Decided to keep things friendly and platonic for the time being, at least on paper. But fam, that magnetic cosmic pull was too strong for either of us to resist long-term in reality. We legitimately couldn't keep our hands off each other, even after acknowledging we probably shouldn't keep messing around like that. Eventually, I realized that if I could do the whole monogamous, one pussy for life kind of thing with anyone, it'd be her. I was catching real, non-surface level feelings for this woman, no cap. A few months later, I manned up, put a ring on it, and we got hitched. I was ready to officially trade in my polyamorous ways for a simple, happily ever after fairy tale with my wife. At least that's what I thought at the time before shit hit the fan. So for a while, fam, things were golden between me and the wife. That honeymoon phase was mad real. We were dumbly in love, inseparable, and the sex was still off the chains. I low-key thought I had it all figured out at that point. Like I finally found the one person I could settle down with and be completely content in a committed, monogamous situation with. But if I'm being fully transparent with y'all, there was a small part of me that did miss that lifestyle from time to time. Not gonna front, the idea of sleeping with other people beyond my wife would still pop into my head every blue moon. Just a stray thought here and there about how freeing and euphoric that polyamorous, sexually open mentality was back in the day. But those moments were fleeting at best. Whenever they did arise, I'd quickly shut that shit down and remind myself that what me and wifey had was worth sacrificing that for. She was more than enough for me, or so I convinced myself at the time. Fast forward to last year around this time. We're a couple years deep into this marriage now and things are still relatively peachy between us. Never any major blowouts or red flags, just your regular run-of-the-mill married couple shit. You know, The occasional squabble over something petty like leaving the toilet seat up, but nothing too crazy. Then out of nowhere, my wife tells me she has to attend some work function thing one weekend, an overnight situation downtown with her colleagues and higher-ups. Says she'll be out late, probably sleeping over at a friend's crib in the city to be safe, rather than driving back that night. I'm NGL. I was a little bummed at first hearing she'd be gone for basically the whole weekend, but at the same time, I trusted her fully and didn't think anything of it beyond just missing her presence for those couple days. You feel me? So Saturday night rolls around, and right around 10 p.m., I get a text from the wifey saying she's going to be staying out even later than expected and crash at her friend's spot like planned. I'm still chilling at the crib, watching the UFC fights and sipping on a brew, so I'm like, okay, cool, no biggie, be safe and I'll see you tomorrow, love you. The next day, she finally comes strolling back through the door. But something seems off about her, fam. Her energy is mad weird and reserved, not her usual bubbly, warm self when we reunite after her being away. I'm picking up on these weird, awkward vibes, so I make her a cup of tea and ask if she's good or needs anything. But she ain't trying to hear it. Just kinda shakes her head and mumbles something about needing alone time before retreating to our bedroom. At this point, I'm hella confused, but also low-key worried something went down at this work thing that really shook her. So for a while, fam, things were golden between me and the wife. That honeymoon phase was mad real. We were dumbly in love, inseparable, and the sex was still off the chains. I low-key thought I had it all figured out at that point. Like I finally found the one person I could settle down with and be completely content in a committed, monogamous situation with. But if I'm being fully transparent with y'all, there was a small part of me that did miss that lifestyle from time to time. Not gonna front. The idea of sleeping with other people beyond my wife would still pop into my head every blue moon. Just a stray thought here and there about how freeing and euphoric that polyamorous, sexually open mentality was back in the day. But those moments were fleeting at best. Whenever they did arise, I'd quickly shut that shit down and remind myself that what me and wifey had was worth sacrificing that for. She was more than enough for me, or so I convinced myself at the time. Fast forward to last year around this time. We're a couple years deep into this marriage now, and things are still relatively peachy between us. Never any major blowouts or red flags, just your regular run-of-the-mill married couple shit. You know, the occasional squabble over something petty like leaving the toilet seat up, but nothing too crazy. Then out of nowhere, my wife tells me she has to attend some work function thing one weekend, an overnight situation downtown with her colleagues and higher-ups. Says she'll be out late, probably sleeping over at a friend's crib in the city to be safe rather than driving back that night. I'm NGL. I was a little bummed at first, hearing she'd be gone for basically the whole weekend. But at the same time, I trusted her fully and didn't think anything of it beyond just missing her presence for those couple days. You feel me? So Saturday night rolls around, and right around 10 p.m., I get a text from the wifey saying she's going to be staying out even later than expected and crash at her friend's spot like planned. I'm still chilling at the crib, watching the UFC fights and sipping on a brew, so I'm like, okay, cool, no biggie, be safe and I'll see you tomorrow, love you. The next day, she finally comes strolling back through the door. But something seems off about her, fam. Her energy is mad weird and reserved, not her usual bubbly, warm self when we reunite after her being away. I'm picking up on these weird, awkward vibes, so I make her a cup of tea and ask if she's good or needs anything. But she ain't trying to hear it, just kinda shakes her head and mumbles something about needing alone time before retreating to our bedroom. At this point, I'm hella confused, but also low-key worried something went down at this work thing that really shook her. So for a while, fam, things were golden between me and the wife. That honeymoon phase was mad real. We were dumbly in love, inseparable, and the sex was still off the chains. I low-key thought I had it all figured out at that point. Like I finally found the one person I could settle down with and be completely content in a committed, monogamous situation with. But if I'm being fully transparent with y'all, there was a small part of me that did miss that lifestyle from time to time. Not gonna front. The idea of sleeping with other people beyond my wife would still pop into my head every blue moon. Just a stray thought here and there about how freeing and euphoric that polyamorous, sexually open mentality was back in the day. but those moments were fleeting at best. Whenever they did arise, I'd quickly shut that shit down and remind myself that what me and wifey had was worth sacrificing that for. She was more than enough for me, or so I convinced myself at the time. Fast forward to last year around this time. We're a couple years deep into this marriage now, and things are still relatively peachy between us. Never any major blowouts or red flags. Just your regular run-of-the-mill married couple shit. You know, the occasional squabble over something petty like leaving the toilet seat up, but nothing too crazy. Then out of nowhere, my wife tells me she has to attend some work function thing one weekend. An overnight situation downtown with her colleagues and higher-ups. Says she'll be out late, probably sleeping over at a friend's crib in the city to be safe, rather than driving back that night. I'm NGL. I was a little bummed at first hearing she'd be gone for basically the whole weekend. But at the same time, I trusted her fully and didn't think anything of it beyond just missing her presence for those couple days. You feel me? So Saturday night rolls around, and right around 10 p.m., I get a text from the wifey saying she's going to be staying out even later than expected and crash at her friend's spot like planned. I'm still chilling at the crib, watching the UFC fights and sipping on a brew, so I'm like, okay, cool, no biggie. Be safe, and I'll see you tomorrow. Love you. The next day, she finally comes strolling back through the door, but something seems off about her, fam. Her energy is mad weird and reserved. Not her usual bubbly, warm self when we reunite after her being away. I'm picking up on these weird, awkward vibes, so I make her a cup of tea and ask if she's good or needs anything. But she ain't trying to hear it. Just kinda shakes her head and mumbles something about needing alone time before retreating to our bedroom. At this point, I'm hella confused, but also low-key worried something went down at this work thing that really shook her. So this weird standoffish energy from my wife persists throughout the rest of that Sunday too. She's just being mad reclusive and distant, barely even making eye contact with me. I'm starting to low-key panic internally at this point, you feel me? This ain't like her at all. We're usually tight as hell, that ride-or-die couple who's always got each other's backs no matter what. My mind starts racing with all sorts of horrific scenarios to explain her erratic behavior. I'm thinking maybe she was sexually assaulted at this work thing and is too traumatized to open up about it yet. Or maybe one of her coworker homies died in some fucked up way and she had to witness it go down. I mean, what other reason could she have for icing me out so hard like this? By Monday morning, I've reached my breaking point with the silent treatment. She gets ready for work and walks out that door without so much as a word or even a glance in my direction. I'm working from home that day, and it damn near killed me having to sit around stewing in my own anxious thoughts while she was gone. The second she comes back through that door after work, I put my foot down, fam. I try to be understanding and give her space at first, but this is getting ridiculous now. We've never been the type of couple to shut each other out before, you know what I mean? We're a team, a unit. There's no secrets or bullshit between us, or so I thought. So with the utmost compassion, I flat out tell her, babe, I need to know what's going on with you right now. This isn't like you at all to be pushing me away like this. You know you can tell me anything without judgment. Please, just talk to me. And that's when the floodgates open. My G. This poor woman just breaks down in front of me, years streaming down her face as she confesses through the sobs. Turns out at this work function, they all went out clubbing as a team. While they were there, she locked eyes with some young stud across the dance floor, and they started grinding up on each other. The details are still kinda hazy, but from what I could gather, she got sloppy drunk and ended up going home with this random guy to smash. In that moment, I couldn't help but laugh a little bit out of pure relief, not gonna lie. I'm just thinking to myself, oh thank God, I was imagining some seriously messed up traumatic shit went down this whole time. So I try to console her, pulling her in for a hug and saying something dumb like, babe, is that all? I was worried something horrible had happened to you. This ain't no big deal at all. But instead of calming her down, it's like I just poured gas on the fire, fam. She pulls away from me with this look of utter disbelief and disgust on her face. You could have sworn I just shot her dog right in front of her by the way she's staring at me. You don't care? She shrieks at me through the tears. My own husband doesn't even care that I cheated on him? I'm just standing there feeling mad, confused, and defensive at this point. So I explained to her in the calmest voice I can, "Babe, it's not that I don't care at all. I'm just coming from a different mentality than you when it comes to sex and intimacy, that's all. We both know how I'm built from the jump." But my wife is straight up not having any of my calm, rational explanation, fam. If anything, my nonchalant reaction only seems to be pouring gasoline on the raging bonfire that is her anger and anguish right now. She starts unloading on me with all these wild accusations and insults, claiming I've never actually cared about our relationship or marriage from the very beginning. That I'm just some heartless, emotionally detached prick who only sees her as another warm body to stick my dick into whenever I'm feeling frisky. I try my best to defend myself, telling her plain as day that none of those hateful things she's spewing could be further from the truth. That I do genuinely love and care for her deeply. So much so that I was willing to completely change my freewheeling lifestyle just to be with her. But she's too far gone down that spiral of self-loathing and distorted thinking at this point. My wife is fully convinced that I'm just a natural-born sociopath and smooth-talking player who has probably been cheating on her since day one of our relationship. The lack of trust and resentment she has towards me in this moment is damn near palpable. "Have you ever cheated on me before?" She outright screams in my face, her eyes swollen and makeup running from all the crying she's been doing. Man, in that split second, I honestly consider lying to her and saying that yes, I have stepped out before. A part of me thinks that if I admit to being unfaithful too, it might help alleviate some of the immense pressure and guilt she's putting on herself over this one mistake. Maybe it'll make her feel a little better about herself, but I know that's only a temporary band-aid solution that won't fix anything in the long run. So against my instincts, I steel myself and shake my head somberly, admitting the truth, that I've never once cheated on her or betrayed her trust in any way since making that sacred marriage commitment. I'm fully expecting her to call me a bald-faced liar or erupt with more unhinged hostility after dropping that bombshell. But instead, it's like someone just completely deflated her in that moment. All the blinding rage and anguish seems to get forcibly sucked out of her body in one fell swoop. My wife just sinks down limply on the couch, head in her hands, and lets out this heavy, mournful sigh that damn near breaks my heart a little bit. When she finally speaks again, her voice is barely above a whimper. "I've made a terrible, horrible mistake," she laments, unable to even look me in the eyes. "How could I do something so awful and break your trust like that? You deserve so much better than me." Yo, at this point, I'm over this dramatic pity party she's throwing for herself. Feel me? I need to woman up and remind her of exactly who I am at my core. Someone who operates on a completely different wavelength than society's norms and expectations when it comes to sex, intimacy, and the concept of monogamy. So I take a seat beside her on the couch and gently place my hand on her knee to get her attention. "Babe, listen," I start, keeping my tone as measured and soothing as possible. "I get why you're beating yourself up so badly over this right now, I really do. But you have to try and understand that what you did doesn't affect me the same way it might devastate other dudes out there. I'm just wired differently when it comes to these things, and you knew that going into our relationship." She finally meets my unwavering gaze then, her tear-stained eyes pleading with me to elaborate further. So I forge ahead, carefully weighing each word. "From the very beginning, you knew I came from a place of free love and sexual liberation. No possessiveness, no jealousy, no ridiculous double standards. Just acceptance and an open mind when it came to exploring our desires, even if they stray outside the conventional norms sometimes." I reach out and grasp her hand then, locking eyes with her to convey the full weight of my sincerity. Don't get me wrong, the cheating aspect isn't exactly ideal from an ethical standpoint of open communication and respecting boundaries. But babe, I'm not about to sit here and act outraged or betrayed over you getting a little strange on the side. Especially not when you were drunk, and clearly not in the right frame of mind to be making sound decisions in that moment. My wife just stares back at me in disbelief throughout this whole heart-to-heart, like her brain can't quite process the words leaving my mouth. But I can visibly see the tension slowly unspooling from her body with each passing second, like my honest perspective is finally breaking through that tornado of guilt and shame swirling inside her mind. Way I see it, you made a mistake in the heat of poor judgment that night, and you've been absolutely torturing yourself over it out of misplaced guilt ever since then, I continue gently. And look, I'll admit, I'm not exactly thrilled or proud of what went down. That would be dishonest. I pause then, making sure I have her full, undivided attention before finishing my thought. But I'm also not about to hold this one indiscretion over your head, or punish you further by feeding into the overly dramatic narrative you've created in your mind. You feel me? You're still the same amazing woman I fell in love with and chose to spend my life with, despite our differences in how we view sexuality. One drunken lapse in judgment doesn't change any of that for me, babe. Not one single bit. With that, I pull her in close and just hold her as she breaks down, crying into my shoulder once more. But this time, it feels less like tears of anguish and more like the healing release of all that pent-up guilt and shame she was tormenting herself with. For the first time since she walked through that door, I can finally feel the last of her defenses dropping as she allows herself to be truly comforted by me. We'll get through this latest rough patch, no doubt. At the end of the day, this woman loves and respects me just as fiercely as I do her. We just have contrasting beliefs and personal philosophies when it comes to the nuances of love, sex, and intimacy. But as long as we make an effort to accept and appreciate each other's differing perspectives moving forward instead of judging them, I'm confident our unorthodox romance will persevere. Maybe we'll even come out stronger on the other side of this storm. So after that raw, no-holds-barred heart-to-heart between me and the wifey, it was like this dense cloud of dread and toxicity that had been choking out our living space finally got blown away for good. You dig? Like we'd finally cleared the air in the most primal, soul-bearing way possible. Don't get it twisted, though. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows right away, neither. That awkward tension and fragility was still low-key lingering between us in the aftermath. We'd just been through some seriously heavy shit, airing out repressed traumas and having our existences as a couple shaken to the core and all that. But at the bare minimum, there was at last a mutual understanding and acceptance that had been rekindled through our impassioned confrontation. You feel me? Rather than just bitter resentment and alienation fueling the thickening distance. We spent the next few hours simply holding each other close in a tender, grounding embrace, not needing to say shit else for the time being. We were both just drawing strength and reassurance from our physical connection again, after feeling so spiritually and emotionally divided these past torturous days. Eventually, though, my wife did slowly pull away, but this time her energy was giving mad, peaceful, settled vibes, rather than all that furious, misguided animosity from before. Even with her eyes all puffy and red from all the heavy waterworks, her overall demeanor was calm and level again. "Baby, I'm so sorry I unloaded all that venom and toxicity onto you earlier," she said in this small, raspy voice that still sounded whittled from the emotional exertion. "Letting my own deep-seated insecurities about intimacy cloud my judgment like that. You didn't deserve any of those lashings I dished out in the heat of the moment." I just shook my head and pulled her trembling frame back into my embrace, stroking her hair soothingly. "Nah, don't even trip for real. After everything you've been mentally putting yourself through these past few days, I get why you were feeling so overwhelmed with anger and shame that you just snapped, you know?" She nodded slowly against my chest, her body seeming to melt even further as the tension steadily drained out. "It's just, I've never felt so disgusted with myself before over anything, babe. The way I rationalized what I did as this unforgivable violation of your trust and our sacred marriage vows, sheesh, ... it made me feel like I was this horrible, wretched person in that moment. No cap. But I don't view what went down as some kind of relationship-ending violation at all, though," I insisted clearly, stroking her cheek so she'd meet my gaze. "We've always been upfront about our differing mentalities regarding sex, intimacy, and the whole monogamy thing in general from the rip, remember? I'm simply trying to apply my personal philosophies to this situation, just like you were adhering to your own beliefs." She stayed silent for a long while after that, like she was finally taking a step back to really absorb and digest my perspective from a more level-headed space, you know? When she did speak again, though, her voice was calm yet assured in this steadfast way I hadn't heard from her in a long time. "You're absolutely right. I can't keep judging or punishing you and myself by these conventional standards and norms that were never truly ours to begin with. We made the conscious decision to embrace our differences and contrasting stances on sex and intimacy a long time ago when we first came together, projecting my own misguided guilt and hang-ups onto you over this one isolated incident. That was so unfair of me." My wife reached out and took my hand then, locking eyes with me in an expression of pure remorse and vulnerability I'll never forget. "What I did was wrong. There's just no denying that plain truth. Even considering your free love mentality, I still violated the firm boundaries and privacy of our marriage by stepping out without having an open discussion with you first. It was an egregious lapse in judgment on my part. No sugarcoating it." She paused for a heavy beat, steadying her trembling breath before continuing her thought. "But despite how intensely ashamed and hard I've been on myself over this, I don't want this one mistake to act as a wrecking ball that demolishes everything we've built together. You know? Our love, our connection, our spiritual bond. It's something bigger and more sacred than that single indiscretion could ever diminish. It's stronger than that temporary moment of weakness. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes moving forward to make things right between us again and regain your trust in me, if you'll give me the chance." I could hear the sincerity and conviction resonating with every word my woman spoke in that moment. Fam. She was humbling herself and baring her heart to me in a way she never had before. And real recognize real. I couldn't help but admire her courage and vulnerability in the face of such intense adversity, FR. So I met her shimmering gaze directly, keeping my expression open and unwavering. "Babe, you've already taken the biggest first step towards making things right just by having this tough conversation with me and being upfront about how you truly feel. By owning up to your mistake through honest communication, even when the truth is mad difficult to voice out loud. That's really all I can ever ask of you. To keep having open, judgment-free dialogue with me at all times, no matter what, even when it's uncomfortable as hell." A small yet hopeful smile finally crested her lips then, as she soaked in the weight and acceptance behind my affirmation. "Really? So, you're not going to leave me or go through with divorcing me over this isolated incident? You're actually willing to try to move forward and work through it together?" The fragility lingering in her tone in that moment damn near shattered my heart into pieces, not gonna lie. So to reaffirm my commitment to her, I pulled her in close once more and planted a lingering, reassuring kiss on her forehead. "Of course I'm not going anywhere, you stubborn-ass woman," I stated clearly, letting a laugh of relief eke out. "Like you just said yourself, our love and this profound connection we share is way bigger and realer than one drunken mistake made in the heat of the moment. I'm not about to sabotage my own happiness by just quitting on us and everything we've built together over one careless lapse in judgment. You feel me?" She let out this long, shuddering exhale then, finally burying her face into the crook of my neck as she whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for being you, and for helping me find clarity again after being so lost in darkness. I honestly don't know what I'd do without your guidance and patience actively loving me through this. Hey, that's why we're ride or die ones, baby girl," I murmured directly into her ear, showering her hairline with a trail of tender kisses once more. "We gonna get through this storm raging around us together, hand in hand, just like we've weathered every other adversity that tried to tear us apart before. You and me against this cruel, unforgiving universe, always and forever, remember?" She fervently nodded in agreement, fresh tears now glistening in her eyes, but this time they seemed to shine with pure, unfiltered gratitude rather than agony or self-loathing. Without uttering another word, my wife surged upwards and captured my lips in a deep, passionate, molten kiss unlike any we'd shared for a long while. A sacred vow, a stirring rebirth of the promise we made to each other all those years ago. As the flames were rapidly stoked between us yet again, I could literally feel the last lingering remnants of pain and negativity that had been looming over us melt away in an instant, being washed over by that familiar, all-consuming fire that still burned within us both when we're truly in sync as divine counterparts. My hands instinctively began roaming her body with an almost ravenous rediscovery, reacquainting myself with every lush curve and inviting warmth that I've so dearly missed being deeply intimate with. This time around, when we finally came together as one, it felt electrically charged and vivid in a way it hasn't between us for ages. It felt like we were shedding the damaged shells of who we used to be, allowing our true, primal selves to re-emerge and intertwine on the most spiritual, soulful level. There was an undeniable poetic rebirth happening with every escalating caress, every passionate touch, every cry of ecstasy that escaped our lips. When we finally reached that euphoric peak together, it was sheer bliss. We clung to each other desperately, gasping, yet never wanting to let go and break the profound connection. We were fused into one consciousness after feeling so painfully divided just hours before. As the rapturous waves subsided, my wife pulled back just enough to meet my gaze, her flushed face glowing with pure peace and contentment. The look in her eyes was one of ardent devotion. "I love you," she whispered with complete conviction, "more than anything in this universe." I gave a joyful laugh then, brushing the damp hair from her brow tenderly. "And I'm never letting you go again."